Live thing started a little sooner than I expected. So, this is Veronica Monet, and you are in the shame-free zone. I am here with my good friend started a little sooner and soul sister. I expected. I had to get rid of that echo. I always forget that echo. Yeah. So, where was I? Veronica Monet, host of the Shame-Free Zone. Here with my good friend and I feel soul sister, Leva. Leva is in Costa Rica today and almost every day now. I'm in Northern California, and we found out several years ago, actually, that we have quite a bit in common. And the two things that really stand out about our origin stories is that we are both cult survivors and we are both incest survivors. So we're going to talk to each other about the traumas and tribulations of growing up with that heavy of level of abuse in your childhood and where we are now, all these years later, after accessing a lot of healing tools. Please leave your comments, questions too. I don't know if I'm going to be able to field all your questions, but we are live. So if nothing else, I will come back afterwards. Leva, oh my God. Thank you so much for your courage. One of the things I love about you is how unabashedly honest you are about your process and about who you are. And you are, to me, the very definition of zero shame.
Mm, Thank
The
you.
viewers here probably know a lot about me. If they don't, they can read it up in the masthead of this YouTube channel or on my Facebook page where it's going to get posted again. How about sharing a little bit about you?
Hmm. Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that feeling the energy of having someone reflect back to me about no shame, that's really powerful and it's really mm, historical because I wasn't always that way. I mean, I grew up very strict Jehovah's Witness, and in those religions, shame is one of those things that's used. Shame and guilt, they're used to keep you in line. And despite the strictness, or maybe because of it, I think sometimes when there's too much strictness, things go sideways. The repression goes sideways. And because of that repression, I experienced incest with my father at age 8.
8.
And age 8. And I didn't actually remember that until years later, but I had all of these physical symptoms. By the age of 11, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I had migraines, blackouts, and all of these things. And the doctors couldn't tell me why it was happening, and they couldn't fix it either. And it wasn't until years later and years of healing and unraveling that I could first heal parts of it and then actually remember what caused it. Because I did recall the sexual trauma, but not until years later did I remember it was my father. And then it was like,
Oh.
oh, that makes sense. Oh, that
Wow.
really makes sense. You know, and because of that resonance in my body, also when I was 21, I left the religion. And a few days later, then I experienced gang rape because I had that.
Oh, 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 oh. Did that almost feel like, oh, now I'm being punished for abandoning God?
I did. Yep. I conflated the two of like, I'm being punished and like, I wanted nothing to do with God. I actually looked up all the different religions and I was just like, they're all just, I mean, I don't know if you can swear on this, but
Oh,
I was
yeah,
just,
it's the Schaefer song.
okay,
Swear away.
cool. I was like everyone and everything because I was like, no, just no. For many years, I couldn't even say God. I wanted nothing to do with God, nothing to do with
Right.
religion. And, I got into first how I reacted to being raped by four men. I was just angry. I was livid with everyone. I hated everyone and everything, including myself. So the way I acted out was I just started sleeping with everyone. Like I used people. Like, okay, you can get me a car, a house, money, all of these things. Like that works. I don't care if you're married or have a girlfriend or whatever. Like it was immaterial to me because
Sure.
I could get something from them. And then once I stopped that, I then went, the pendulum swing and didn't have sex for years. I tend to
Wait,
be a
wait,
little.
wait, wait, wait. Why did you stop that?
I was feeling guilt and shame about it. Of like,
Okay.
I was feeling that, and just, I mean, that's not my natural, way
Yeah.
of being, but because of the reaction, because of, the compression of
Yeah.
all of the pain and anger and all of those things,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how I reacted. And once I got that out of my system, then it was like, okay, this is not who I am. It's not useful. Like, I just don't want to. So I did the pendulum swing of like, okay, I'm just not going to have sex at all. Which,
It totally makes sense to me.
or let's just stuff it all in. Just
Yeah.
stuff it in. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until years later, I was 34, and it was the day after my 34th birthday. And I had taken a blood test for a job, and they called back and said, you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, why? They said, like, your blood level's super low. Now, again, I had been building all of these different health issues. I was feeling like shit, but I was doing all the things. I got my to do list done, but I felt horrible at that time. But I was getting everything done. And I was like, okay, I'll just get some organic iron, I'll just do that. That's fine. And my friend picked me up and she said, no, you're going to the hospital. So she took me to the hospital.
Right.
I went to the ER and they were shocked. They said, you have less than a quarter blood volume. We don't know how you are functional. And it was only because I was doing healing practices at the time. They said, you only have 2 weeks to live. And
Wow.
I was like, well, shit. And I mean, literally, that was the only thing I said to the doctor. Well, shit. Like there was no anger, there was no real reaction. It was just kind of like, and then I
Wow,
took a few
you are really shut down at this point.
hugely, hugely.
You don't know that you're dying, and when you find out that you are, so what?
Exactly. And I had already actually been into energy work and somatics at that time because I mean that wasn't how I was as functional as I was. But again, still I was so spiritually bypassing the whole thing of like, okay. So I took a few hours and then I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I need to actually make a decision of do I just want to be like 2 weeks, it's been real, like see you next time, or
Wow.
or actually go through the process of what was underneath the healing that I was missing.
And of
And
course, the doctors never told you there was something emotional underneath.
yeah, I mean, they were going to
And
send me
you
home.
knew that.
Yeah,
You knew
yeah, they were going to send me
that.
home and let me die. I was like, okay. But
Wow.
I decided I wanted to live. So I told them I needed surgery at the time, and they said, you won't make it. I was like, well, let's try anyway. I'll sign, extra plus plus if you kill me.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
it's fine. All of those things went through that. I had multiple transfusions. and many things to get me to that process. And then I went and stayed with a friend in Oceanside, California. And for 3 months, all I did was walk on the boardwalk of the ocean. It did nothing. I dropped everything. I dropped my business. I dropped my healing clients. I dropped everything. I just
Yeah.
focused on my body. And then when that 3 months came to a head, I was like, okay, what was really going on? So the surgery I needed was for fibroid tumors. I had baby head size tumors, 9 of them. And I was like, that's all the anger, all the hurt, everything I stuffed, all the repression, and it was literally killing me. So I need to look
And
at
it's in your reproductive organs, so
exactly,
which kind of points to the, I'm not a doctor, neither are you, but it sounds like it points to the sexual trauma.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then I started going even deeper into the sexual trauma, and that's when it came forward that it was actually my father, which made a lot of sense because I'd known again for years I had been
Tell us
had
a
a
little bit about your dad, because he's an interesting character in this whole family drama, because you are born into the Jehovah's Witness,
mm,
but your dad has a very interesting history.
yes. So my father, he was a Black Panther. uh, he went to Vietnam. I actually believe that whoever he was died in Vietnam. Like
Oh,
there's a picture in my grandmother's basement of my father before he went and after he went, and his face looks nothing the same. Like if I didn't know or was told that's the same person, like there's
would
no.
not. Yeah.
So I do believe whoever he would have been was destroyed in Vietnam.
How old were you when he went to Vietnam?
So I was actually not born. He was
Okay.
he was he was he returned, was heavily into drug use and alcohol when before he hadn't been, before going to Vietnam. And then he got into the Jehovah's Witness religion, and that's where he met my mother. And they started the relationship.
Okay. So, to what degree do you feel the Jehovah's Witness membership could have shaped some of the incest, or do you?
I do actually. Again, when something is so structured, so repressed, so, this is what you do, this is what you wear, this is what you think, this is who you marry, all of these things, these
Yeah.
directives,
Yeah.
when it's so structured, it's actually a human response to resist in some way. And
Sure.
sometimes it goes really sideways, especially when there's such um, regulation is the word that's coming around
I,
sexuality. I mean, you don't talk about sex. Sex is only in marriage. No
right.
homosexuality. All of these things. And again, it's so tightly wound that on top of trauma, and it's weaved under that. And something I shared with Veronica that I didn't know up until 2 years ago, um, my father was the product of rape. I had never known that his father
Yeah.
raped my
Yeah.
grandmother.
Yeah. Yeah.
I only
It's
knew that no one talked about him. And I finally asked, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting information. Again,
Yeah, I was posting this on Substack earlier today. The idea that a lot of people who perpetrate are also survivors. So, as you know, my dad sexually abused my sister and I, and I was not quite 7 when he took pornographic photos of my sister and I. That made her 5. Not even 5, 4. going on 5. So it it was so easy to demonize my dad, so easy to see him as the evil person. He was physically violent towards my mother. He raped my sister when she turned 13. Um, he loved guns. And he was mean, you know, and unpredictable and narcissistic. You never knew when he was going to blow up on you. He beat me up once. Um, that was the dad that I knew. It took me starting to write my memoir when I started going, my dad was an incest survivor, and I knew my mom was. But I was like, so was my dad. His older brother is 20, and his older brother was like raping all of his 10 siblings violently sometimes. So I now have compassion for my dad. That does not excuse what he did at all. And this is the kind of faulty thinking that I'm wanting to help our culture move from, and I know you do too, away from the idea that we can't hold two thoughts simultaneously, that people can deserve our compassion just because they're survivors, and they also need to be held accountable for their crimes. And how we deal with that accountability, how we effectuate that accountability was, to me, like a very complex terrain that probably varies from situation to situation. But I wonder, when you know that your dad was a product of rape, do you characterize him as kind of a demon seed, or do you see him as somebody who grew up in an obviously very abusive family and had the trauma of the Vietnam War? How do you hold that?
Mm. I too have a lot of compassion for him. I had actually already forgiven him when I found out. It was just a really important piece of information for my own, kind of self, because you do wonder of like, how could you do that to your child?
Oh,
And,
yes.
just a piece of information of like, okay, this is ingrained and in cultures of women being raped, and again with our families, like it coming down through the line.
Yeah.
And it took me a lot to get there. I mean, like years of like going through somatic therapy and healing and trauma and somatics and all of that. So I didn't come
As
to that
well.
point like, oh, okay, I forgive, it's fine. Like, no. It was a very long process. But I can remember one key moment that stands out. I was on a flight back from um, North Carolina. I had gone to a retreat, and I was reading this book called Children of the Sun God. And it's this woman, she had gone to a safari in South Africa, and their party was attacked by white lions.
Yeah.
And she ended up having this really shamanic experience and ended up actually creating a sanctuary for them, and et cetera, et cetera. But there was one particular point that stuck out that again had nothing to do with my father, and the retreat had nothing to do with it, but it really struck me. And it was talking about how in African culture, they don't believe in prey and predator.
Mm.
So for instance, if a lion kills a wildebeest,
Mhm.
they view it as contractual. Their soul contracted
Oh,
to have this experience. So
uh-huh.
there was no predatory act. And for me,
Okay.
and again, no one has to take this on. This was my particular personal awareness. I was like, okay, my soul contracted with my father's soul to have this particular experience. Now, I would not be the person that I am without all of these experiences. Did they suck? Absolutely. Were they horrible? Yes. And I also would not be that person So, in feeling, this was not actually a, let's see, how do I want to say it? It was almost a predictive behavior that our souls chose. So, in that light, I could be more forgiving.
Okay. How do you reconcile that spiritual framework with the idea of accountability? And you know, you and I've talked an awful lot about righteous rage and justice for survivors.
Yes.
How does that sit in your internal ecosystem?
So there's a difference between the soulscape and the humanscape. So it was an awareness of why it happened. Should it have happened? No. On a human level, was it deplorable? Yes. Should it have happened? Absolutely not. So on a human level, that's where the accountability comes in, and holding that person, again, the forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for you, so you can let go of the the wanting to get something from the other person, and wanting I'm sorry, or wanting a I shouldn't have done that, or even
Mhm.
that it's just it's not needing that. If it happens, okay, great, but it's not needing that, it's letting go of it for yourself. And then the accountability piece is, okay, your soul may have chosen that, but there are human consequences. So that's where the accountability comes. There should be a consequence. There needs to be a stop. And for those of us in this time who have experienced this, we are the ones who are saying it ends with us. So this is why it's so prevalent right now. I mean, in the world, it's, you know, every news, every Facebook, is saturated at this time with this thing of where accountability has not yet taken form, and how we need to actually call for it, because it needs to stop, and it needs to stop with us.
What kind of strategies do you envision for accountability, Leva?
Hmm, that's a good question. Accountability. Hmm.
And I would also ask, do you distinguish between accountability and retribution or punishment? Are those kind of conflated for you, or do you see them as being separate?
I mean, it's actually a good thing you asked me, like, now that I'm 48, when I was like 20, I would have been like eye for
Yeah,
an eye, like, all right, let's see, let's just deliver him, and into the
sure. I understand.
into the system. I mean, to be honest, if I hear someone in the system who, he ends up being raped in prison, be like, oh, well. I mean, that's still my human response
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like,
I understand that. Sure.
uh, as far
I
as,
have that too, wanting to kind of see people get their just desserts, as it were.
yes, I mean, I'm a Libra, I did grow up with the super religious, so like justice has been a thing for me. And as I said, it's probably good that you're asking me now with a little more maturity and a little more, a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
more.
yeah.
And, you know, it's also, I think, case by case. Like, I don't have children, but if someone did that to my child,
Yeah.
I mean, someone might have to stop me, to be honest. I mean, no matter what, spiritual beliefs or things like that, you
Right.
don't actually know what would happen until it happens. As far as the things that have been coming out that are, in our culture, because it's
Uh-huh.
been so prevalent, and because there hasn't been accountability, that's why it has gotten so deplorable and so sadistic and so awful. And now that it's coming out, now it's time for us all to get together to actually hold everyone accountable, no matter what their position, no matter what their bank account, no matter, I mean, if it's your priest or your president or your, you know, PTA, you know, teacher or whatever, like there needs to be a social accountability. And like all of us starting to get together.
So
Um,
what about your dad? Like when I think about my father, I've had some people tell me, "Oh, I would have killed your dad." Um, I had a cousin recently say something about we should have cut off his balls. I mean, you know, it's just eye for an eye, I guess. I don't know. It's like some kind of biblical justice that I don't ascribe to. Um, I envision like, did I want my dad to go to prison? And here for me, this is where the righteous rage and the parts of me that have healed and are wanting to be able to hold my righteous rage and also hold the idea of there being accountability for anybody who perpetrates. There was a time when I was probably 11 and my mom was holding a loaded gun on my dad because he was getting ready to hit her yet again. And she was out of her mind with fear. And she grabbed this gun that had my dad had modified it to be fully automatic. She pointed it at him and said, "Don't come, don't, you know, don't touch me." And I had fired that gun. I knew how it operated. If you pulled the trigger just one pull, it would empty an entire clip of about 30 rounds and it would walk away with you. So it would travel to the side,
mm,
which means basically cut somebody in half. But the thing was, is I was standing right next to my dad. And I really wanted her to pull that trigger. I knew it was going to kill me too, but I wanted our family nightmare to end. And I really wanted my dad dead. I just, I hated him. He just seemed like he was constantly inventing new ways to make our life torturous. So now that I'm an adult and I've left that hellscape, the idea of, oh, I would love my father to have gotten what he deserved, go to prison or have somebody rape him in prison or kill him or whatever. I don't feel that way. Um, I'm much more in touch with the fact that my dad was also an incest survivor and I think mentally ill because of it. I really do think it drove him mad. And so I just, I look at him as somebody who was incredibly sick. I don't even know if he could have gotten therapy that would have helped him, but he was born at the wrong time. And this is one of the things that I see us when we're thinking about justice and cancel culture comes in to try to cancel anybody who ever owned a slave or anybody who was ever a misogynist or anybody who ever sexually perpetrated. And I'm kind of like, but we're taking them out of the context of the culture that they grew up in, where maybe those things were tolerated or actually endorsed or promoted. I think that we have to have a different way. The last words I said to my dad, and we had been estranged for, oh gosh, 20 years. But just before he died, I told him that I loved him. And he said he loved me too, which was not an easy thing to get my dad to say after disowning me. That meant a lot to me. I had gotten to the point where my forgiveness meant I was capable of loving him too. but I speak very freely about his crimes, and I call them crimes, and I call him a pedophile. And I don't want to dress it up. I don't want to excuse it. I don't want to water it down. I want to find a solution. The fact of the matter is, there were a lot of pedophiles in my family on both sides, and the idea that, oh, we should just put them all in prison. Well, I have no family at all then.
Mm.
So there has to be a different way. I think maybe for somebody who's preying on other people's children, we put all of them in prison. I don't know. But people who prey on their own children, I don't see that how that heals the family. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a delicate matter, and it's such an important one. I think
Sure.
that's why it's so it's so prevalent right now because it hasn't been addressed. That's why it's gotten so bad. So this is why we really need to take a look at the families, the institutions, all of these things. Like, how did it get to this point? And that's where we really need to solve it.
Yeah.
Mm. I mean, I know with my own father, like for years I talked freely about, having sexual trauma and things like that, but it wasn't until several years ago that I actually started saying it was my father because I was like, I'm still protecting him.
Yeah.
And I stopped doing that. So I mean, if
Yeah.
someone scrolled back on my Instagram post or whatever, you would see when I shifted that of like, okay, it's actually my father and things like this. And I had also been disowned. I didn't talk to my parents mostly for 23 years. And it wasn't
Painful.
until
It's a blessing and it's also painful.
yeah,
At least
yeah,
in my experience.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, when the people who are supposed to love you shun you as well as everyone else, there is, a very interesting pain and awareness and growth also that goes with that. And
Yes.
to to actually come on the other side, and I think it's what, maybe 3 years now, I ended up going to see my grandmother, which is where it happened, in her basement. And
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I have, even my nervous system is getting a little bit. That
it's
sounds
like I had
really confusing.
I had done so much work, and actually when I was there, I also did some more work, and I went, my grandmother's house is like it's a time capsule. Um, and I went downstairs and I sat on the same stool and I faced the same mirror and did some processes with my 8-year-old self, and merged those two and integrated those two. But at the same time, my father was there and I didn't have a trigger. And I was like, yes, I've done the work. I can go into the house and I can do all these things. And I still did more work. Again, that was on top of that. I wasn't triggered, but I was like, okay, like whatever pieces of me are still left in this basement, whatever
Right.
part of myself I want to, bring that in my little girl,
Yeah.
uh, and did that process. But I could see him, and I could also see how broken he was. Like, he experiences Parkinson's disease. He's an alcoholic. Um, I was telling Veronica just before this, I believe he's slipping more into maybe dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that, because he actually called me a few days ago, which is very interesting timing, when I hadn't spoken to him again for some time.
Yeah.
Of okay, this interesting, but to
It's
feel
suspicious timing.
to actually see him, I see the hurt in him. And I see the pain and the trauma, and having the information about, his father and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the racial trauma, the Vietnam trauma, the drugs, so
Right.
much goes into
Right.
that, this conflation. And again, it doesn't excuse it. However, it's a lens to look through of this man went through so much. And again, it does not excuse it at all. He went through
No.
so much that I can see how he would reach for light, no matter how distorted that action was.
Oh, meaning the light
Yes,
in the eyes of a child.
yes, yes. And again, there there is no excuse. Again, even the soul piece, it's an understanding, but it's not an excuse. So with seeing that through that lens, it's like, does that broken person need to be more broken, as you're saying? There are some people who are very blatant about it. I mean, we're seeing that in today's culture. And okay, there's a different reference point. Again, we're talking about accountability and how do we bring this. I don't know that I have any answers, really. I
Well, what
think
would
it's
you like to see happen with your dad? Because I think, before we can have the broader conversation about society, I just think it's so important for survivors to get together and talk about their personal journeys, their personal experiences. I don't actually hold that I made a contract with my father to be abused. Um, but I know a lot of people do have a spiritual belief that there's a contract beforehand. I, I tend to view it a little differently, and I think that we all come here with kind of a set of lessons to learn, and some of us really screw the pooch, um, and get it really wrong. Um, and I think,
lesson fail.
yeah, try again, try again.
Yeah.
Um, and if and it, I would also say I believe I have a personal experience of there being younger and older souls. My parents, when I was 4, I looked around and went, "Oh dear God, my parents are so young. I better hurry up and grow up." I was just like horrified that they were in charge. And I didn't mean they were young, like, yeah, they were young because they were in their 20s, but that they were young soul-wise. They
Yes.
had not been around because, my experience was I was more connected to who I was before I incarnated. And of course, a lot of people don't share these viewpoints. I don't need anybody to enter these conversations believing in past lives. It's just something I believe in. But yeah, and I have had some connections with my dad since he died, but I had no connections with him for the first several years after he died, which is unusual because I connect with a lot of loved ones when they die almost immediately, but not him. I didn't want to be around his soul. I felt like his darkness had pulled in some dark entities, and
Mm,
so I wouldn't even keep his ashes in my house.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but when I started writing my memoir, and I was getting in touch with, oh my God, my dad is an incest survivor. Um, this is a horrible, horrific family environment he grew up in. I felt him come to me one night with gratitude. It was still narcissism. It was no accountability, no of, oh, I really screwed up your health. Sorry about that. Just finally, somebody gets it.
Mm,
And again, just for me, like this is a very undeveloped soul. Um, anyway, I guess that's one of the ways I hold my dad is
mm,
that there's no excuse for what he did, but between his trauma and his insanity, and I really do think he was mentally ill, this is not a competent human being. And then you combine that with the fact that his soul is also very young and still narcissistic, there's not a lot I can expect from this being. Um, and it just reduces the desire to see retribution. To me, retribution only has value if the person gets it. Like if they're, what do we want? We want them to wake up and go, "Oh my God, I had no idea how horrible what I did was. I'm so sorry." At least I think that's what we want. Maybe we don't. I don't know. What do you
Mhm.
think? If somebody wanted to get retribution, which is really just another form of revenge, right?
Mhm.
What's the purpose? What does that give us as survivors?
Mhm. I mean, I think that's maybe where retribution isn't the solution. I mean, like hanging them up, killing them, raping them, to have them have that same experience. I don't know that again, it's just perpetuating the thing. Like it doesn't do
Exactly.
anything other than perpetuate more harm.
Yeah.
Um, I think when we're bringing to awareness, that's the first step. Again, we may not know the solutions right now, but bringing it to light, awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
bringing how prevalent this is, having discussions like this and actually going through, okay, the people who are perpetuating this, what is their history? Is there a history in it, or is it just some perversion, or are they just complete fucking assholes? Like there's a spectrum.
There is a spectrum. And there are sexual offenders who also happen to be murderers, and they could be put in prison for 30 years, and then they let them out because they were such model, inmates, and they just immediately go out and rape and
Yeah,
murder again.
yeah,
And in those cases, I'm actually am in favor of the death penalty. Personally, I'm like, no, I'm sorry. That's like a dog with rabies. Just no,
yeah.
no. There should not be any. I don't think we should have to pay to keep them alive. I just think they should be removed. And I'm always thinking about this one guy who cut off the arms of women that he raped. And,
Mm,
he was in prison for decades. They let him out. He did it all over again. That's inexcusable. There should not be a second person
seems
who
ridiculous.
is, who is raped and loses her arms. It should not happen again. If somebody is going to go that far with a crime, they are so insane or something, they should be eliminated. So there's some of my righteous rage.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely need to be whoever has perpetrated needs to, if they have a position, they need to lose it. If they have financial resources, I personally believe they should be drained and given to the people that they have accosted. And then, hmm, yeah, like how do you actually stop it? I mean, that's the question because
Well, we have to heal the trauma.
yes,
If the trauma just keeps traveling through my dad absolutely hated pedophilia, despised it, wanted his older brother to go to prison for raping his 11-year-old stepdaughter. That's what my father believed. But trauma and mental illness took him somewhere else.
yeah, and twist it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can have all the cognition we want, but if we're not healing all of our wounded parts, if we're not actually going in and finding those traumas, we can't actually change things in a meaningful way. But
Yes.
I'm going to come back again and ask you for, I think, the third or fourth time, what would you like to have happen to your dad?
Mhm.
It's a very difficult question, but we are talking about family
Right.
child sexual assault inside families. What are we going to do with that? Because right now the model is basically keep the family secret, protect the perpetrator, and then eventually somebody gets really upset and alienated and hurt and reports them and they go to prison and nothing stops. They get
Yeah.
out at some point and you got to keep the grandkids away from them. I mean,
So in my father's case, so I did a healing process where I actually, my child self would have preferred him to be arrested, to actually have um, his family know and hold him accountable, not
yeah,
in you know, the alienation, but
right, right, right.
the there's love for the person you are, and this is unacceptable, and this is inexcusable,
Yeah.
and to have that. So I actually went through that healing process. I actually personally believe that my father is punishing himself. I
Uh-huh.
personally believe that the Parkinson's, the massive alcoholism, I believe that was his punishment and the escape. Also, I think holding on to the religion, that, very structured thing, when you're so fragmented in yourself, like the more you hold on to something, because you don't have those parts of yourself. I think that's why he held it so himself. So like when I left
No,
the
he
religion,
stayed. So your dad, wait, let me rock this a little bit. Your dad stayed a Jehovah's Witness.
to this day.
And that's a really strict cult. They will dissociate you from the church if you violate their prescriptions. So
But
nobody
you
ever
can,
found
right, you can say you're sorry and, attend and go
it.
through. So,
Was
I
he
mean,
outed? Was he outed as a pedophile?
he was, I don't actually know what he was, it's called disfellowshipping in that religion.
Okay.
Uh
Thank you. Forgot. Disfellowshipping.
3
I know
times.
it's extreme.
Yes, 3 times, and then when I was 21, I was disfellowshipped myself, so he had nothing to do with me after that. I don't know the details of why he was disfellowshipped,
Okay.
but I know he went back in, but I mean, that's one of the lack of congruence with that religion that I have.
Oh, the cult that I was born into, um, did not preach pedophilia at all. It was very, very sexually conservative, against homosexuality. Heterosexual people were not supposed to engage in things like oral sex because that was considered homosexual. So just intercourse missionary position, basically.
Right,
And only, of course, between two married people.
yeah,
So divorce was considered a sin. Like, if you got a divorce and remarried, the new marriage it wasn't valid. It was
yeah.
horrible. Um, but what we the guy who his name was Herbert W. Armstrong, and he would just change the rules however he wanted. So then one day he decides, after he was widowed, his wife died, he wanted to get married. He's in his 80s. He wants to marry his 30-year-old secretary, and she's a divorcee. So the church doctrine that he had preached was divorce is not valid. You can't remarry because you're still married to the first person. And he changed that just so he could marry her. And then people were very upset and talking behind his back about his hypocrisy. And this is what propelled me to leave the cult, because I was 19. I was sitting in a big church convention. He was at the podium. He brought his fist down on it and he said, "How dare you question me? I am the right hand of God."
Oh,
And I
well,
went, oh, okay. I think that's actually something that is a sin. Um, so So then I gave myself permission to leave. That's basically what I had to do. It would be decades later that the cult splintered and fell apart, and people told on him. He'd been raping his adult daughter.
Mm,
So he was a pedophile too. I was born into a cult founded by a pedophile. And
mm.
I guess really this incestuous pedophilia is literally everywhere.
It is. It is. And the only way something can start the healing process is again to bring it out into the light. That's why it's so important you're doing this series and who you're talking about in your book and having
Yeah.
these conversations because it's been so, you know, whispered about, not talked about. Don't
Yeah.
say that. Like just ignore that. Like, you know, it's been
And
so hidden.
even now, the whole world is talking about pedophilia as it applies to the elite, as it applies to Jeffrey Epstein. And there are some people who are saying, okay, whether it was Jeffrey Epstein or Trump or Bill Clinton, they all need to be accountable. And that's the next step, which I'm really appreciating, with people getting away from the partisan politics and starting to look at, justice for survivors, regardless of who perpetrated, except when it comes to families. There is
Mm.
so much resistance to looking at what's happening in the home. And yet, that constitutes 68% of that 1 in 4. So 1 in 4 girls, 68% in the home, either a parent or another relative or a friend of the family. Yeah. And I feel like the obstacle to being honest about that is the fear of losing a family member that you love. Because I got to tell you, no matter how much I wanted my mother to pull that trigger that one day when I was 11, hearing somebody say that they'd like to kill my dad, which by the way, he's dead, but that they would have, if I'd known him, I'd kill him. It hurts.
Mm.
It's like that's that's part of me. No matter how insane and criminal my dad was, he's still my dad.
Mm.
And there were other parts to him. There were parts of him that were funny. There were parts of him that were smart. There were parts of him that were an inventor. There were parts of him that were loving. And I think, I don't know if you have any memories like that about your dad, do you?
I do. Um, we used to see all of the 007 movies together.
Oh,
That was like a
yeah.
special thing. And he was a chef, so I would spend weekends and holidays, cooking with him, and we'd have contests of like who could make the lightest biscuits, or who could make the best chili that day, or who could devein shrimp the fastest, or things like that. He was nicer than my mother,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Understand that.
yeah, more kind of gregarious and like, more social. He also wasn't there a lot. Um,
Yeah.
he actually turned out to be a good father to my sister. My sister
Mm.
experiences Down syndrome. We're a year and 2 days apart. And I've checked in on her energy and things like that. And he actually um, never did the same things to her that he did to me. So he's
Yeah.
actually been a good father to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, despite our relationship, I can honor that he actually took
Yeah.
good care of my sister, both of my parents. Um, you know, for someone that, especially in the time, I was growing up, we were growing up, of like, if someone
Yeah.
experienced a disability, they're like, just ship them to, an institution and, be done with it. But they didn't do that. So,
Oh, good
you know,
for them. Good for
yeah.
them. That's one of the things that I just feel like the conversations that survivors of family incest um, can have, what I'm trying to encourage here is that we can embrace it all. Because if we can't, then there's going to continue to be a large percentage of people who just can't look at the dark side because they're super aware of the things that mattered and were good and that they loved.
Mhm.
And that's even part of how the denial system works, it's like, oh no, that never happened, or it couldn't have been my dad, or I think something happened to me, but I don't know what it was. And you went through that yourself. Do you
Mhm.
think, was it difficult to go, oh my God, it was actually my dad that did this?
Mm. I think at that point I had done so much work. It was more a um oddly enough, the word that's coming is relief because it answered
Oh,
so,
wow.
so many questions of
Yeah.
why I had so much trauma and why I had such reactions and
And
why
why you had so many health issues,
exactly.
particularly autoimmune.
Yes. So it was like to know how close it was, again, like as you said, like my body was attacking itself because the trauma was so close. The relief was in the information of like, that makes sense. Again, not the
Yeah.
relief of like, oh, it was great that it was my dad. No, like the relief of like, that makes huge sense of why it was such a prevailing energy in my body, my relationships, and why there was such distortion around sexuality and things like that. Of like,
Mm.
yes, there is, no matter if it's rape or incest or all of the things that happen, of course there's going to be reactions and distortion. But when it's a family member, when it's the one or two people that are supposed to love you and protect you, like,
Yeah.
that's gonna fuck you up, and, like, to know, like, "Oh my god, no wonder."
Yes, it's an attachment wound times 100, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
I can remember I went back and forth on my dad so much because I did not like him from like age 4 to 8. I thought
Mm,
he was hideous. And then I went through a period of thinking that my daddy really loves me and he's going to protect me.
mm,
And and then he spanked my mother because, these stupid religious cults. Um, and when he did that, I was like, I hate him.
mm,
I don't like the kind of power he's trying to wield. Yeah, we fought like crazy. We
mm,
really did. Um, and yet, I mean, he was so abusive that you had to obey. So there were a lot of ways in which I just had to kind of leave my body all the time, pretend that I was living somewhere else. But the nightmare of it all, I just didn't have the skill set, if you will, to go into denial the way that my other family members did. So
mm,
my dad could like fondle my sister's breast right in front of my mother, and she wouldn't even see it.
mm,
Yeah. So that is some heavy duty family denial.
yeah,
Heavy duty. I don't even know. I I don't have that ability. For me, I was like sitting in the living room going, this is a nightmare. I can't believe all this stuff is happening and everybody's telling me it's not happening. I would confront my dad about the breast fondling that he was doing on both my sister and I and tell him that he needed to stop. And he'd look at me and he'd go, none of what you're saying is happening. You're crazy.
mm.
I was like, and I begin to wonder, am I crazy? Am I hallucinating stuff? What's going
Maybe
on
a bit
here?
of gaslighting, yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit of gaslighting. So when I I think my sister was years later, my sister said, "Oh yeah, that was happening." But for a good stretch of time, she denied that it was. And you know, the thing that I think is really important too to know is that the human brain has a capacity to put certain things over in a corner where other parts of that person don't know, aren't aware of it. There's dissociative amnesia where people do things and really authentically can't remember having done them. And then there's dissociative identity disorder where people actually kind of split into different personalities who are
Yep.
not connected to each other. And it's just a theory of mine, but I suspect that when you sexually traumatize a child, the propensity for them to do that kind of splitting accelerates, it increases. So, yeah,
Yeah.
asking my dad, did you do that? Do you remember doing that? I don't know if he had the capacity to track what he was doing. It violated his moral code to such an extent, you
Yeah.
know? And
My mom.
I will never know how much he knew. But when you talk about you feel like your dad is punishing himself, I could see elements of that in my dad too, because after he and my mom divorced, he just lived alone in a broken down mobile home
Mm,
and went insane. He
mm,
went literally insane. He had black plastic on every single window in the mobile home.
mm.
That's he had no life, no people, no nothing. It's just so. Your dad called you. Are you? Does that mean he's no longer disfellowshipped you, or what does that mean?
I mean, I'm disfellowshipped through the religion. And I mean, technically that still stands. Um, I I guess he's a little more willing just to have a little bit of conversation. I mean, it's not a deep conversation at all. It's like a couple
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah,
But as what he asked me was, well, what he said was, I've been thinking about you. And I was like, okay, what were you thinking? He says, I was worried about you. And he's like, did you talk to your mother? And I was like, okay. So my mother's been dead over 5 years, and she
yeah.
didn't talk to me
Poor
for the
dad.
23 years previous to that. So, we're going back almost 30 years. And I was just like, okay. I was like, what is this? And I just said, I haven't talked to her. I was like, like what's the
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
the least traumatizing thing that I can say in this moment? I'm like, no, I haven't talked to her. And then, just had a really brief conversation. He asked where I was, how I was, things like that. Um, it was just really interesting timing. Again, having this conversation um, of, opening this energy. Um,
Yeah.
And it could be because, he's perhaps maybe closer to transitioning out of this world, like he's closer to that side. So, wrapping things up, or if, he's experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's, there's going to a time of when, we had um a relationship that had more relating, things like that.
And
You
he
don't.
might, if he is spending more time on the spiritual plane, he might have also just intuited today's conversation and been worried about that.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. You I
You
don't
know,
have an answer to that.
when we started, you were talking about all the health issues that you had before you got more healing. And I think about ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences. There's this test you can take to see what kind of impacts it would have on you. And those of us that were abused as children have very high ACE scores. And and of course, it depends on how much abuse. In my case, kind of off the charts. So the statistics say that if you had a really traumatizing childhood, you're more likely to have diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, and also for, suicide, depression, drug addiction, alcoholism, and die early. It's really cheery news. Um, so, so I know you and I invest a lot of time and energy into taking really good care of our sacred bodies and loving them in ways that the perpetrators in our past did not, because I'm a rape survivor too, as well as an incest survivor, just like you. So, but I also, I know that for me, ongoingly, I have kind of like a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response in my body. So my brain can be thinking happy thoughts and I can be doing things that I enjoy. And yet, somewhere in the background, my body is still playing the we're going to get molested or raped or hit tape. So I'm working right now with, I've been in therapy for 40 years and I've done all kinds of healing. And I live a really vibrant, beautiful life in a lot of ways. And I enjoy exceptional health, especially for my age. So I'm it's very, very grateful, but I'm also just aware of the toll that that childhood took on my physiology. So even if I get to the place where I can feel peace inside emotionally and and go to a place of forgiveness if that's what I want. And by the way, I just want to say I don't think all survivors need to forgive. Um,
No.
I could think of a rapist that I have not forgiven and I don't want to.
Well,
Fuck him. But but I did want to forget my dad, or it just happened naturally somehow as I learned more about our family history. It's still a lot of heavy lifting that I have to do to get this body to a place where it's not living in a state of perpetual trauma. And I see you nodding your head, and I'm thinking maybe you identify, I don't know, but I'd just love to hear your reflections about that.
mm, my particular way was freezing. That was how my body responded. And I have to be conscious of that even these days. A few years ago, I had kind of a personal and a social attack, the cancel culture, as you mentioned, and I froze. Um, and it brought up some of the trauma and the, kind of curling in on myself and things like that. I even got to the place of suicide. I was literally
Ideation.
a day away of
Wow, honey.
had researched the
Oh, you
best,
were Oh,
like
you were furthering. You weren't just thinking, you were looking into.
yeah,
Oh, sweetheart.
I had decided I wasn't. I actually had peace about it. It wasn't like a cry for help. It was a decision. And I called a friend of mine and said, tomorrow I'm committing suicide. And I just wanted one person to know because my family was still not in, you know, that. And so much of my life had collapsed. So, you know, having to work through that again, I was like, okay, there's still some triggers left in my body
Oh,
around the
yeah.
freeze, around the hiding, around the curling into myself, again, the depression, all of these things. Again, like there are pockets in
Yeah.
our bodies. And
Right.
I mean, if we had to deal with it all at once, we would be insane or dead because
True.
there's so much. So
Yeah.
our body goes through different, processes, different timings, different, pieces where it can, okay, I can deal with this now. I can deal with this now. I can we can heal
Mm-hmm.
this now.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I can't say I'm 100% healed. Like,
Yeah.
I can't say that.
Will we
Um,
ever be?
I know, like, like until you're dead, I don't know, like if there's actually a possibility for that. But it's being conscious of the ways of like, oh, am I retracting in relationship? Am I freezing? Am I not saying something because I'm, afraid of something? So we have an extra layer of consciousness because we can so drop into the automatic because we've had it since we were a child. So it can become so, it's like that track on a disc or something, like it can just go
Mhm.
drop right in, and we're not even conscious of it until we become conscious of it, and we
Exactly.
more aware. So it is being more connected to our body, more connected to our thoughts, more seeing how we're relating to people and checking in. Okay, is there a way I'm dissociating or, hiding or freezing or fawning or however we kind of present, and it can change and it can evolve. And I mean, our bodies and our egos, they can be sneaky too, of like like, this is a really good coping
So,
mechanism.
okay, you recently had planned suicide.
Yeah, I think that was like
I,
4
I,
years.
I think the viewers would probably like to know how you pulled yourself out of that.
I don't even know actually what my friend said. I can't even recall the conversation, but she did relate to me of like, you were serious. Again, it wasn't a cry for help. Like I was 100% serious. Like this was planned.
Right,
Like it was going to
right,
happen the
right.
next day. And whatever she said got me off of that track. Again, I don't
Oh,
remember
well,
the
bless
conversation.
her. Bless
Yes.
her.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm really glad you're still here.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah,
And I do. I've thanked her. I was like, you literally saved my life.
yeah,
Um, and then she also she was in Arizona at the time, and she invited me and she said, "Why don't you just come out here and just kind of be?" So it kind of got me out of my head. I was in a new space, new environment.
yeah,
I was close to a friend who she's also a healer.
yeah,
And again, I started doing more healing work. I was like, okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
here's the next layer.
Another layer off the proverbial onion. We just keep pulling that off. And I kind of think that that metaphor holds for what is happening around pedophilia worldwide right now, too. That people are starting to see, oh, wow, this is like a lot of different men and
Yeah.
sometimes women that have perpetrated this crime. What is going on with this? How are our systems supporting this and allowing it to to further? And then also just is it patriarchy that we need to look at? Is it our family systems that we need to look at? Is it hierarchical human relationships? How much of it is misogyny? How much of it is male entitlement? There's just so many different layers to look at
Mhm.
about,
Yeah,
trying to unpack this. And I'm really grateful that we are. Um,
yes.
I don't know if you know this, but you know, I have an education in psychology, and
Mhm.
Freud was interviewing a whole bunch of his female clients, doing psychoanalysis, and the majority of them claimed that their fathers had had sex with them or
Mhm.
molested them in some way. And Freud, in his cocaine-addled brain, and the fact that he was so enmeshed in the culture at the time, came up with the Oedipus complex as his theory on why all these women had mass delusions of being sexually abused by their parents. It was because they really wanted to have sex with their dad.
Right.
And so then he took that and he turned it into all little boys want to have sex with their mothers, all little girls want to have sex with their daddies. That's normal. It's if he maybe hadn't been a cokehead, had such a coward to face the system, to call it out. Maybe we could have started unpacking this years ago. But
Yeah.
thanks to him, it got completely perverted and reinterpreted, and here we are now. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually think because it is so flagrant and in our faces, um, the the accountability will start out there, like the institutions, the elite, those things, and then we can actually work in. I think, like you said, the onion, you have to work your way in. It's easier to look outside of yourself, outside of, families and things like that, to like see like, okay, these entitled men who have all this money and, positions and things like that, we can start holding them accountable, and then it can start moving inwards and can
Yeah.
start getting to where it started in the family and in, the mindsets of how we're brought up and how it's carried through, as you said, through psychology and through wealth and entitlement and, just um
And and
wa-
churches,
yep, churches and
churches, um,
wanting
and
immortality and youth and, that
and
grabbing.
the whole the wellness industry is now getting shook up because of Deepak Chopra coming out in the Epstein files. And then Cesar Chavez just made the headlines as somebody who was raping little girls. Um, it's it is everywhere. And I hope that we can move to a place where we don't have to um, obliterate. Like I was actually kind of disturbed when they were, oh, they're going to change the names of all the streets that were named after Cesar Chavez. And I'm like, part of me says, okay, perhaps that's respectful of the survivors. But, I still wear my dad's last name. I don't, I don't think that erasure of this actually helps us evolve. And he still accomplished something of value. So why can't we hold what he did that was good and at the same time say he committed crimes he should have gone to prison for? I mean, it's as if we're always looking for a hero or a demon. We can't actually see people as whole. And I believe the reason we can't do that is because we're so afraid that we will excuse their crimes and not hold them accountable. And I feel like that's the missing piece. We can't have compassion and forgiveness if it doesn't come with healthy boundaries and accountability. And and we can't actually get to the root causes and help all survivors if we can't start looking at all of our sacred cows, you know, whether it's our grandparents, our parents, our pastors, priests, everybody needs to be accountable to this. And I, myself included, because I'm really grateful that I didn't carry the family legacy forward as far as incest goes, but I did reperpetrate domestic violence. And if if each of us could look at the things we've done that have harmed other people and be accountable to that, then maybe we could take this away from shame and start getting real about how we're going to solve the horrific abuses. Because I know for you and I, being sexually abused as a child it's horrible. You wind up being more likely to be raped as an adult woman. And then you have all these autoimmune diseases and problems with your health that nobody should have to suffer with. So, um, we don't want to minimize the damage at all. That's the exact opposite of what I want to do. But I also want to find some way that we can heal the whole family. And not just my family, your family, all of the families, but the human family,
Mhm.
you know?
You said it's relating to both the light and the dark, you know, the the bad and the good. Like, it's not bifurcating them, it's actually seeing yourself as whole. Like, we're not
Yeah,
just one thing.
or not.
Our fathers weren't just one thing. The people who are perpetrating things, they're not just one thing. So it's actually recognizing that they're all those things and not
Yeah,
trying to, well, this person is all good, this person is all bad. I mean, that's part of where the perversion and the
yeah.
comes out, because if you
And we're
only see,
kind of, I know, and we're kind of there right now. Like, oh, well, fuck Cesar Chavez. And it's like, okay. I hear you, but wow, you're gonna be really you're just not gonna have anybody to thank for the good things that have happened in this world if you cannot hold they did something good and they were also a sexual predator because there's far too much of that, far too much of it.
yeah. And again, there's no excuses. It doesn't
Absolutely none.
matter what they did,
Zero.
just excuse.
Zero. And we are living proof that when you do that to a child, it has far-reaching, um, long-term fallout.
Yeah.
But we're also survivors and warriors, and we're doing great.
Mhm.
I've
Yes.
been on a healing journey for 40 years now. You've been on one for about 20.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, darling. We've been talking for an hour and a half, and I let's check in again when we maybe get a little further down the road and have more ideas about what accountability could look like for families.
Yes. And as it starts to happen in the world, yeah, let's check in also about um, how maybe things can be optimized, as we start seeing it out in the world, because
Yeah.
it's definitely coming to a head right now. So,
It sure is. I can't tell you how happy I am about that. It's like finally we're gonna have a conversation about this horrible family secret. Finally.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. The family secret is all out right now.
It's out. All right. Well, I love you, darling. You know that.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I hope to come visit you in Costa Rica sometime this year,
Yes, that'll be beautiful. And
probably.
yeah, thank
Probably
you for,
after the summer, since you have travel plans.
yes, yes, yes.
Uh,
Yeah. Thank you for having these conversations. It's so important. And it's pivotal, because no matter what's going on in the world, we don't want to also minimize or lose the importance of this issue just because there's
no.
institutional issues also, because
Yes, there are. And I'll be protesting tomorrow some of those institutional issues. But survivors, that is my main reason for speaking and writing right now. Survivors. All right, love.
yes.
We'll talk
Mm,
soon.
yes, thank you.